Hello and welcome to today's webinar, 4 quick wins that you can achieve with Entra Identity Governance. For those of you who don't know much about us, our team at Condatis deliver bespoke identity and access management solutions leveraging the entire Microsoft Entra product family. At Condatis, we design our solutions to help customers with challenges across onboarding, security, and enhancements to their overall operational efficiency to meet business needs with precision and excellence. Today, we have the pleasure of welcoming our guest, Shelley Hill, a senior global black belt in advanced identity at Microsoft. Joining her today is my colleague, our solutions architect, Matt Fernandez. So you're all here to listen to the best in the business, so I'll hand over to Shelley.
Thanks, Yaz. Well, you may have noticed that our identity capabilities have had a rebrand. Entra is the new product family that encompasses all of Microsoft's identity and access capabilities. Now, this new name is signifying our expansion across new categories, and it's bringing all of our capabilities for identities under the one umbrella. Obviously, the focus today is our expansion in identity governance. So identity governance addresses the inefficiencies that exist with manual processes for managing identities today. Onboarding new users to any organization involves many moving parts. There are multiple workflows and processes that have to be performed for a user to gain access to the resources they need. And historically, these have been manual processes. It's IT admins have had to rely on scripts to complete the onboarding process. It's often time consuming. And when you've got a user starting, they just need access to the resources to be productive on day one. We want to improve those processes so that we can be productive. Now, Entra ID Governance can bring value in many different parts of the user journey. And there are capabilities already part of E3 and E5 today, or Entra ID P1 and Entra ID P2, as you may be familiar with them. Plus, there are new identity governance features that support all of the supplemental processes that go beyond onboarding. So I'm going to step through what those are. And starting with onboarding your users automatically, you can do that with our API-driven provisioning that onboards users from any repository using any automation system. Then we can Then we can automatically provide birthright access for those users, and we can provide the ability to request additional access as needed with multi-stage approval workflows and separation of duties checks. Then we can recertify that access to ensure that access is removed when it's no longer necessary. And we also want to use just-in-time access requests to elevate access to privileged roles only when needed. So we don't have standing access to those roles that are privileged access. Lastly, when a user is leaving the organization, we need that user to be deprovisioned from the applications and the directory so that they no longer have access to resources. And this leaver process forms part of our new lifecycle automation capabilities to manage joiner, mover, and leaver workflows. So today we're going to be highlighting some of the newer capabilities, as well as the key areas where you can quickly obtain value. Now I'm going to hand over to Matt, who's going to explain the benefit of one of our newest integrations.
So yeah, I'm going to talk a little bit about verified ID, which is fairly new over the last few years, and it is getting kind of significant development investment as the next stage of identity. And it follows, people might be more familiar with the term decentralized identity, and the idea that the information about a person is not stored within a big database. It's actually owned by the user, and they can present that data to an organization and control which data they present. So it's a way of increasing kind of the privacy and empowering users to take control of their own personal data. So I'm going to talk a little bit now about work that we have done with a customer where we've actually used this as part of their onboarding process to streamline and ultimately better secure their identity lifecycle management and speed up their onboarding process. So the customer's Sellafield, they're a UK nuclear facility providing energy. And one of their key requirements was a verification of staff when they're accessing not just digital information, but actual physical assets as well. And so what we were able to do with Verified ID was provide them with a digital wallet that has credentials in that's particular to that individual, that can then be verified at point in time as they're moving through the system. And a bit of how this kind of worked. So a new person, say myself, I was joining the system, I would onboard and I would get a wallet, and then I was able to apply to government agencies to get my credentials. And this might have been like an identity thing, like proof of address, I am who I am, here's my driving license, something like that. But it can be something more granular as well, like have I passed the course that allows me to do this welding on site, or is my certifications up to date for this specific assessment? And so when I'm on site, rather than having to submit mounds of complicated paperwork and spend weeks for other people verifying, I'm able to present this credential and have someone on site verify that, yes, okay, I am who I say I am allowed access, and I am qualified to do the tasks that I'm there to do. This was a fantastic way of streamlining this so that the onboarding process took kind of minutes rather than weeks, and people could get to work doing the tasks they needed to do. And on sites involving things like construction, this is really important to make sure that the people that are required to do time-sensitive jobs can action those quickly and keep the whole project moving. We all know what the red tape can do to projects for delays and stuff, and so this is a fantastic way of kind of easing some of the burden for that. What we're able to do with identity governance now is enhance this and actually use the Verified ID to verify access to digital services as well, using access packages. And now once Verified ID is set up within the portal, I've got a little screenshot here. It's really easy to create a new access package, assign everything that you'd like to do for that, and then say, actually, do you know what, as an additional conditional access check, I would like to make sure that they have a valid Verified ID credential for that. So at point in time, we can say you are only allowed access to this access package that might have sensitive information, providing your Verified ID decentralized credentials pass the checks that we require. This is a fantastic use case for privileged access, privileged management, and combining that for both on-prem and digital enhancements of the conditional access policies. It's very cool to see kind of out in the wild and using. So we've completed a proof of concept with Sellafield, and they love it. I think I can say that. And they're now in the education phase, because obviously this is a bit of a paradigm shift in how people think about identity. And so yeah, in order for this new technology to move into production, there's this education phase where people are learning about it and how it uses, how they can streamline their processes, because it's not just IT that this benefits. The uses of these can have ramifications throughout numerous business processes throughout a company, and so different people have different ideas of how this can benefit them in particular, and so that's a really exciting space to be working in. Okay, next I'm going to hand back to Shelley.
Thanks,
as she
Matt.
talks about some of the advantages to machine learning.
Thank you, and thanks for that that real life example of how you can utilize it in the real world. So another new addition to our identity governance capabilities are, as part of our intelligent recommendations, we've introduced machine learning to access reviews. So when you're doing access reviews or recertification of access, the reviewer is provided with recommendations so that they can make better decisions about whether to approve or deny continued access. So we added a machine learning feature called user to group affiliation. And what that does is calculates the distance within the organization between users to help decide if they're an outlier to the rest of the group of users with access. So for example, it might be that you have someone in your finance team that they change roles, and for whatever reason, they've maintained access to a particular resource. Now, this person's now working for the business services team. Based on the distance of that person in the organization to the rest of the people that have access to that resource, it will flag that user as an outlier. So what it's doing is looking at the distance between users, as well as more nuanced calculations that they assess the metrics and the commonalities that signal that someone as an outlier to the rest of the group. Perhaps this user shouldn't still have access. There we go. Okay, and then another new addition is our lifecycle workflows. So as I said earlier, onboarding new users to any organization involves many moving parts. There are multiple workflows and processes that have to be performed for a user to gain access that they need. And it's more than just creating a user account or disabling a user account. It's all of those supplemental processes that go alongside it. So you might want a joiner process where 4 days before a new joiner starts, you want to execute a number of tasks in preparation for that new joiner. So maybe a ticket gets created in ServiceNow to request that a device is provisioned. Then maybe on the morning of day one, the manager gets sent an email with a temporary access password for that user. And then likewise for joiners, for the leavers, I should say, we also can have stages of offboarding. So the first step might be blocking sign-in on the end date of that user's employment, or it might be that you want to remove all access to resources except for HR so that the person can then access their final pay slip. So it's very flexible in how you configure these workflows. And Matt, I'm going to let you tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so I know the title of this webinar, we've got 4 quick wins, and we haven't actually said quick wins yet. So I'm going to do it now for I guess the 3rd time. This is the first quick win we're going to talk about, and it's a lifecycle workflow for the leaders. And there's something that all leaders leaving an organization have in common from an organizational perspective, and that's once they've left, you don't want them to have access to the things that they did before, because they've left. And often this can slip by the wayside, where someone leaves but their account's still active in the system because there's no sometimes there's a business process in place to say yes, this should happen, but there's oftentimes not that verification over time to make sure that the accounts are either still disabled or have been in the first place. So using lifecycle workflows, let's dunk out of here and into our portal. I'm going to show you a very quick way where you can ensure that everyone who leaves your organization will be disabled. So we're here in Lifecycle Workflows in the Entra portal under Identity Governance. We've got some overview stuff here: when the schedules are running, how many are disabled, how many are enabled, handy things to see. If we then jump into our workflows and we create a new one, we get some templates, and we've got our joiners, our leavers, our movers, and we've got different times: pre-onboarding, onboarding, post-onboarding. So there's different categories you can have. We're interested right now for offboarding on our last day. And you can see down the bottom here, we've got our trigger, which runs off an attribute. And because this is on their last day, we don't need to configure this because it's always on the last day of their employee leave date time. So this field has to be populated. So as long as that's there, this lifecycle workflow will trigger and the actions will happen. Next is the scope. If we wanted to, we could get very granular about who we want this to apply to, if we want it to be a department, or if you've got locations or job titles. There's all sorts you can do. But what we're interested in right now is everybody. So we're going to say it applies if the account enabled is true. And then the actual doing of things under the tasks, the template very kindly pre-populates some things that are kind of common to what we might want. We just want to disable an account, so we can remove these. Or oops, hang on, let's go back. Or we can add a task and pick from all sorts of different options here that apply to our joiner, mover, or leaver categories. There's lots to choose from out of the box for assigning permissions, assigning licensing groups, all that kind of stuff. One that I will particularly call out is the ability to send an email. So if this were, say, a pre-onboarding task, we can say we're going to send an email before the user's last day. And when we configure this, we can say, right, it's going to be sent to that person's manager, and we can configure some additional people if we want to. But what we can also do is customize that email. So we can put what we want, we can call out attributes and make it really personal, add in, links to offboarding processes, that kind of stuff, so that as part of that user's life cycle, people are notified and actions can be taken that need to running up to that. Once that's done, actually, I'll remove that one because I haven't configured it. We'll review and create. We'll make sure it's enabled, and we'll create it. And of course, I've got a duplicate. But
it does just show how easy it is to create even a really basic lever workflow that actually, yes, although you can get very granular and have different personas and different workflows, but for different types of users, really it's a quick win to be able to have just a really basic workflow that at the very least make sure all of your users that are being offboarded, their accounts are disabled, their licenses are removed. That's a really basic umbrella workflow that can ensure that those steps happen at the very least. So definitely a quick win there.
So one of the things, and this leads into our second quick win, which is also in the lifecycle workflow policy, and this is how this would apply to guests, because guest lifecycle is something that often falls to the wayside. There's a lot of guest accounts with permissions to things that might be unknown. So a fantastic way of making sure that those guest users are definitely disabled or deleted, whichever, is to use one of these lifecycle workflows and to have the scope down to user type guest. And that brings us on to a little bit of a demo, because one of the other things around this is the actual management of guest provisioning itself, because what we're looking for is the execution conditions. We want our user hire date and our leave date attributes to be populated. And they're quite sensitive fields. And by default, when you invite a guest, that doesn't get populated. It's just their name, their email address, their company, that kind of thing. So another thing that I would suggest is to then implement something to manage that guest inviter. And so what I'm going to walk through is how that can be managed through the APIs, so that if someone requests a guest to be onboarded, the correct information is captured and populated to then bring them in scope of lifecycle management, so that guest users can be controlled in exactly the same way. So I've got a very basic form here, and I will call out, this is a very basic form just for me to fill in some information. This could be any database, any vendor, the workdays, the success factors, things that support provisioning into Entra, or just something that is posting to the API. So the world is your oyster with where this data comes from, whatever guest management you have, or even if you just want to send the forms out to people, it's all supported. So we've got me, we're going to add me as a guest into this test tenant. Sadly, I've got a very short contract. I'm going to start today. Oh, actually, I'm going to start yesterday. Let's change that. I'm going to start today because that would be awkward. And I'm going to finish tomorrow. And when I submit this, that's going to post all the details I've just submitted through the API. It's going to send me an invitation. But already when that's happened, if we have a look here, I've already been created. And if I have a look at that user, we can see that the invitation status is pending acceptance. So I currently don't have access to the tenant right now. But if we look at the properties, we can see that I have an employee hire date. And you might notice that the employee end date doesn't show in here. And that's because it's a protected field that it is populated by the HR system. It exists in the back end to trigger this stuff, but it's not the kind of thing that you just want to expose into people's user profiles, because I know if I looked in my profile and I suddenly saw that I had a user end date, I might be slightly suspicious about what was in my imminent future. So to help control that flow of sensitive information, this is hidden. Now, I can verify that this works, because if I pop over here and I run this, I can see this is all the information that Entra has on me as a guest user. And we can see here we've got the hire date and the leave date. So we know 15th and 16th when this is going to trigger. So now that they're in, I'm in scope of the lifecycle workflows. And so as a guest, depending on my profile, I can then be added into groups, assigned permissions, or offboarded if my contract comes to an end, that kind of thing. So that's kind of a quick way of how you can control the guest lifecycle stuff. And I'm going to now jump back into the presentation, because the next exciting thing is another new feature to the governance SKU. And this is the identity governance dashboard. And this is the only slide. So let's jump back into the portal, shall we? We have a look in here into my demo tenant. Now, bear with, this is a demo tenant. This has got very limited data. So we're giving you a flavor of what excitements could be within your tenant.
Yes, guaranteed. A real life tenant would be a much more exciting viewing, but you get the idea.
So what we're looking for in here, we've got, a nice big welcome. We've got some big cards at the top that gives us some interesting insights. We've got some guests created. We've got applications and normal user accounts created. And if we scroll down a little bit, we get some interesting insights. And this then, following on from the kind of the guest lifecycle that we were looking at just before, we can see how many guest users we've got. And we can also see insights into what those guests are doing, how active they've been, whether they are whether they're using the system, really. And if this populates, you can see we've got one lowly user who's been inactive for a whole day. But what we can use this information for is to then build, we can see this data. We can go, oh, okay, there's a load there. Why don't we now create an access review to target those guests? And if we have a look in here, we can say, let's do a review for teams and groups. We're going to select a team and group, and it's going to be the whole company. And this is the important bit here. We're going to say we're going to do guest users only.
But it could be all users, couldn't it, Matt? It could be for all your identities if you wanted to, but if you wanted to focus on guest users, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And to scope this down even further, because we're looking at ways that we can reduce the number of guests and descope stuff, we're going to say, let's look at our inactive users. And we're going to say, yeah, okay, 30 days, that's good. Configuring this, we can then choose our reviewers, because we don't necessarily know who those people are. So we don't necessarily have all the information to say whether or not they're okay to be inactive or they should be there. So we can configure this and let that run. And those accounts can then be either removed or action can be taken from it. And going back into the dashboard over time, then you'll be able to see through the inactive guests that number increasing and decreasing, and it helps kind of manage your inactive population.
So that was one. That was quick win number 3. Yeah.
That was quick win number 3.
Yeah.
And
then
we're going to stay right here for quick win
right
number
here.
4.
Yeah, go ahead, Matt.
Privileged access is our quick win number 4. For the eagle-eyed amongst you, you can see that I have 8 permanent global administrators in this demo tenant, which is absolutely not best practice. That's terrible hygiene on my part, and I promise I've only done it to show you. So do as I say, not as I do. So here we can very quickly look at this and say, hey, look, here's all our global admins. And if we know who these people are, and we have, absolute control over this, we could tick these people and either remove their permissions entirely or make use of privileged identity management, make them eligible so that they can elevate to a privileged role with the just-in-time, just-enough permission model. Given that we don't, we can instead create an access review directly from here with a single button that will then send off emails to those people and ask them to justify why they have these permissions. And then those business cases can be reviewed and assessed and appropriate action taken.
Great. So that's quick win number 4. And that is a quick win because you don't actually need, you're not actually taking away somebody's access. All you're doing is triggering that recertification that says you need someone to attest that they still need access to the global admin role, and that they should provide a business justification for maintaining that access.
And the information is key, and that's what the dashboard is about. It's trying to provide useful contextual information at your fingertips so that you can speed up the process and protect everybody in a way that doesn't compromise their ability to actually do their jobs. I'll point out as well, there's interesting information and tutorials on features contained within the governance SKU. So exploring this portal, there's lots of stuff that will take you on kind of learning journeys to see how things work and what else can be done to help you on your governance journey as well, which is very handy. I like it. Okie dokie, let's jump back to the slides.
Yeah, key takeaways.
Yeah.
So I'm going to click to the next one, Matt. So let's just review those 4 quick wins that you can get with Entra Identity Governance. First of all, we had the creating a basic lever workflow to ensure that all departing employees have their access removed. So that very quickly, as Matt showed you, how you can create a lever workflow or process that will just ensure that all of those levers will have their access, their licenses removed, they can be disabled, whatever that basic high-level workflow should be. You can ensure that that is applied to all of your levers, and then over time you can create personas and become a little bit more granular if you want to have differing offboarding for different types of users. But certainly it's a quick win to just have that first basic lever workflow. A quick win number 2 is obviously automating guest onboarding. So as Matt showed you, he has a way of you can use the API provisioning to be able to onboard those users, and not only onboard them, but with those start and end dates so that they can actually make use of the joiner mover lever workflows as well.
Something I didn't mention there as well is that where what I showed was just onboarding user and sending the invite out, you can actually use the same methods but in a self-service way, so that guests can request access to something and all of the stuff is still populated through. So it can work in both scenarios, which is very nice.
Good point, Matt. Yeah. Quick win number 3, reducing unnecessary privileged access. So as Matt just showed you, looking at those those users that had standing access to global admin, that global admin role, to very quickly be able to say, you know what, I don't know, I don't have the authority to remove that access, but I can trigger a review so that they have to attest why they have that access and what the business justification is. And then quick win number 4, reviewing your guest accounts, being able to, in that dashboard, having a good view of the activity of your guests in your environment, and then being able to see it down the bottom. It lists every single guest user, and it tells you when their last sign-in was. Maybe they've never signed in, or certainly how many days they've been inactive. So you have that view of your inactivity, and then from that you can go in, and as Matt showed you, you can trigger a review either on just your inactive guest users, or on all of your inactive users. So yeah, that's our quick win number 4. They're the 4 quick wins I would say that you could get out of Entra Identity Governance without having to spend too much time in business analysis and developing personas. For next steps, we would really like to encourage you to look at the trial. There is a trial. You can enable the trial license for ID governance in your environment. To get the most out of that, of course, we recommend engaging with a partner. You'll get the best value by helping them helping you with some of those advanced scenarios that you might have for your use cases.
Yeah, being able to because it's a one and done trial. Once you've done it, time based, and then it's gone. So if you do some planning and identify
30 days, isn't it?
Is it 30 days? Yeah,
I think it's 30 days. Yeah, but so, yes, that's it. It's one and done.
If you do some planning and you work out some scenarios that you want to do, you can actually engage with a partner and build out some of the architecture for that, so that when you enable the trial, you can configure it and get some real deep understanding of the product and how it works and whether it will fit the bill for you across the scenarios that you're trying to prove out. Which is what, funnily enough, we have been doing with a recent customer of ours. It's a global electronics manufacturer. They've got users all around the world, and they've got quite complicated user scenarios, from basic internal users, guests that may or may not need access to internal systems, nested contractors that need access to things, and short-term contractors that sometimes could be internal but sometimes could be frontline. So there's a huge amount of logic that needs to be run through to determine what kind of access and what kind of permissions can be granted to these people, both from an actual, well, should they have access to this application or not, to well, they're in this country, so can they see this data? So using the lifecycle workflows, then we've been able to demonstrate as part of a proof of concept with them to show that those complicated user personas can be onboarded and that they can be managed in a scalable way. So the next phase for this is to actually build out some more of those personas and start to identify which ones can be brought into live to have the most impact on the onboarding experience, to make everything easier and slicker. And
that went really well. I hear, Matt, so well done.
Yes, I'm quite pleased. Okay, next.
Yeah, so I really want to share this link of the identity governance features. It's really handy. So if you currently have some Entra ID licensing, so you might have Entra ID P1 or Entra ID P2 as part of your E3 or E5 licensing, this link is going to be really handy for you to have an idea of what capabilities are included with what you already have. We are sharing this link again at an actual link at the end of this deck, I think in a couple of slides. So you can Bing search this term here, Entra ID Governance Licensing Fundamentals, if you can't wait to get the link on the next slide. But really handy for you to be able to have a look and see what you already have available. Remember that user journey I showed at the start of this presentation. There are some things you probably already have access to in your licensing. Like you already, if you have P2, you will already have that basic entitlement management already included. And what the identity governance features are will be clear from looking at this from this link. You'll be able to see exactly what the step up is, and all of those features have links attached to them now, so you can click on and see more detail about exactly what the feature is.
It's a really handy resource.
It is. I've bookmarked that. I refer to it every day.
Yeah. Okay, so finally, our last slide. Let's have a look at some frequently asked questions that we get from customers around this. We're aware, because this is recorded, you can't submit your questions, although you can contact us, I'm sure, if you have burning questions when you do watch this. Okay, top of everyone's mind. Question 1, what about MIM? For those who don't know, MIM is Microsoft Identity Manager. It's been around for a long time and was the kind of de facto identity lifecycle management solution that Microsoft have. It sits on-prem and it's often considered the scary black box in the corner that people don't dare to touch in case it breaks, because it handles such complicated logic and scenarios and code-based things that when it's working, you just leave it alone. But MIM is going to be leaving us. So well, what about MIM? So the idea is that the lifecycle workflows are going to take over from MIM. There's a couple of scenarios. One that springs to mind is the password change notification service, for those who are in the know. That at the moment is still handled on-prem by MIM. There's not an alternative. But for connections to applications, services, and the logic being built and that synchronization stuff, that is being taken over by the lifecycle workflows and the HR-driven provisioning. And it's interesting because for those who saw on the page just before, the HR-driven provisioning is included as part of Entra Plan 1 and Plan 2. It's not just the governance license, which is very nice.
Exactly.
So you can get started on that.
Exactly. So at the very least, you can automate the onboarding, that creation of the user account.
Yeah. And that's the important bit, is the HR-driven position. I'm answering question 3 here now. HR-driven provisioning handles user creation, and then it hands off to lifecycle workflows to be the engine that manages those identities through their lifecycle.
Yeah. And yes, and just to finish on that, up on that MIM question there. So basically, Entra ID can support, has support for on-prem apps and resources using connections for SCIM, SOAP, LDAP, SQL, and you can reuse your MIM connectors with Entra ID as well. So, although we are transitioning, there's not parity per se, but we are transitioning some of those features to be able to support what MIM has actually been doing.
Yeah, and there's a huge amount of investment and development in this space, so expect to see features coming out thick and fast.
But you certainly can start, if you wanted to, start moving some of those, or reducing the burden on MIM by moving them over to the more modern JML.
Yeah, and once they're moved over, the lifecycle workflows make it much easier for people to get started on expanding into lots of other applications and services, because the custom stuff is built on Logic Apps. There's a huge catalog already there for you to be able to connect into and process data. Yeah, which is fantastic.
It is. Cool. So next question.
Next question.
Do lifecycle workflows cover external identities? Well, I think you answered that in your demonstration, Matt.
Yeah, the answer is yes. Yeah. Nice and simple.
Nice and simple. Yes, it does. Yes. And as Matt showed, if you want to rewind and go back, it was I think it was quick win number 2. where you demonstrated onboarding those guest users, and then using Lifecycle Workflows to manage the user lifecycle after that. Question number 3. How is HR-driven provisioning different to Lifecycle Workflows? Well, again, as you said, Matt, I think you've sort of just answered that in the MIM question there. But how it's different is because you'll see HR, if you look at that link that we've shared, HR-driven provisioning included in Entra ID P1 and P2 as well. It is just the creation of the user account. So it creates the user account, and you can automatically provide it access to different resources. But what Lifecycle Workflows does is help with all the supplemental processes. It's the staged onboarding. It's things that you want to run tasks before the user start date and on the user start date and after the user start date. It's all those supplemental things to do with onboarding of a user that Lifecycle Workflows supplements, as opposed to just creating the account.
Something to mention as well is that HR-driven provisioning, or even though it's Entra branded and Entra's a cloud thing, absolutely this can provision into Entra ID, but also into on-prem Active Directory using Entra Cloud Sync. So
yeah,
the route to which don't think you're restricted to, oh well, I can't use that because I'm using on-prem Active Directory and that's where my source of authority for my users are. This can still be a solution for you, and the Lifecycle Workflows can then manage users once they're brought up to the cloud.
Yeah, that's right. And then last question, is entitlement management only included in the governance license? And again, I guess no. I think I've answered this question. If you look at the links we've shared, or the link we will share on the next slide, you'll see that Entra entitlement management is actually included in Entra ID P2, the Plan 2. It's just the basic version. So it was what you probably, if you're already using it today, it's probably what you're familiar with. The newer capabilities in entitlement management, and like being able to review your inactive users, and some of the key features like the integration with verified ID. All of those new capabilities are part of the new identity governance license, but basic entitlement management is certainly included in Entra ID P2.
Yes, and I will say again, it's a very good idea to have a look at that site and see what's included, because you might be surprised at how much actually you've already got covered in your license.
And here we are, the link there. So if you haven't already done a Bing search on that, the search term identity governance, lifecycle workflows, fundamentals, whatever that term was. But if you haven't already done that, please do check out this licensing link here. Definitely worth bookmarking. And we've got another link here, which is useful to mention, customer success stories. So there are some stories on here at the end of this link that where it describes how some of our customers have improved their processes and the business value that they've gained from automating their joiner mover lever workflows, not just in the financial sense, but just in terms of the people sense and actually efficiency in terms of speeding that whole process up for getting a user started on the day that they actually join. And on that note, I think we are at the end, Matt. I think that is it. Yes.
Come talk to us. If you've got any questions.
Absolutely. Do reach out if you have any questions. We'd love to talk to you.
Thank you, Matt and Shelley, for your time today, and thanks to our viewers for watching and listening. We hope this webinar has given you something valuable that you can achieve today. If you have any follow-up questions, please feel free to reach out to Matt and Shelley on LinkedIn. But if LinkedIn isn't your thing, just email us at info@condatis.com with the subject ID Governance, and we'll route your questions through to them. This is the first of many exclusive webinars to come on the Microsoft Entra product family, so stay in touch and have a great day.